I have accused characters in books of being one note in a few different reviews in the past. It's a common go-to for me when a character seems to be extremely repetitive or not very well fleshed out. One note character is just a sweeping declaration that this character has one thing that they do, and this is the only thing that the character does, and it's starting to get a little bit stale. If I recall correctly, one of the first instances in which I used this accusation was in the first 3 episodes of The Legend of Vox Machina. I accused Scanlan of being pretty one note, and he was, but he became more well-rounded as the episodes went on, which is pretty expected. I don't know if I exactly made that accusation, but that was a thought that I had when I was watching the show, and there are also all sorts of other examples. I also accused Camlin in The Faithful and the Fallen of being a bit one note. Even though he was a character that I really enjoyed, he just kept hitting a particular note over and over again, and it was beginning to get a little obnoxious. So today I'm going to delve a little bit more into what I mean when I say one note characters, and then I'll talk about how you can fix them. So let's start off by just defining one note characters. Well, the definition is technically in the title, but I'm going to try to be a little bit more informative than just telling you to read the definition. A one-note character is a character who has one particular thing that they do, and they do that thing religiously. Typically, this is when an author assigns a character a single adjective, and then that's all the character gets as far as a personality goes. This is a problem that can plague any story, but I typically see it in comedy and horror stories, especially horror and comedy movies. You will see somebody who is given the adjective of funny or weird or, I don't know, I can't say that. Lustful. The character could be called lustful by the creators of this story, and then all of a sudden that is all the character is, and they are that thing constantly. A lustful character is probably always thinking about something that is sexual in nature. They're constantly flirting, they're constantly trying to get alone with somebody. Ultimately, they're just being a disgusting person, and that is all that they are, and they have absolutely no nuance to them whatsoever. They just have this one adjective, and that is their adjective, and they will not let anybody else do any of the things that adjective allows. It is all for them. And now that I've defined that, I'm sure that you can probably think back to some one-note characters that you have experienced in shows and movies and books. Any story can easily be guilty of having one-note characters. Now beyond this, that one-note character doesn't really have any unique personality traits. They are just built around this singular adjective that the creator has given to them. It brings me back to the days when I was writing, when I found these like character sheet things when I was probably 9 or 10 or something like that. There was a book that I think I got from the library that talked about creating characters. Now the book had a number of different things, but the one that I remember is that it had a worksheet in it that you were supposed to fill out for all of your characters. And the worksheet contained things like the name and the appearance and the backstory, and then most importantly, the personality of the character. And the personality box was actually pretty small. It was just like one line. You could probably write a single sentence in that box. And that is not enough to write about the personality that a character should have. Now, when you're 9 or 10, sure, but it seems like some people just never graduated from using that worksheet to create characters, which is not great. But why is that a problem? Why are one-note characters so bad, especially in a story where characters really aren't going to be at the forefront? In horror stories and comedy stories, do characters really matter? Is their development really all that important? In my opinion, very much so. I think that in any story that has characters, the characters should be well-rounded and believable. They don't have to be perfect, they don't have to go through this huge development arc, but they should be believable as human beings or aliens or animals or whatever the character is. There should be some believability to them. And the fact of the matter is, humans are three-dimensional beings. We are people who have all sorts of different layers, much like ogres.
Example? Example? Okay, ogres are like onions.
They stink?
Yes. No.
Oh, they make you cry?
No.
Oh, you leave them out in the sun, they get all brown, start sprouting little white hairs.
No. Layers. Onions have layers. Ogres have layers. Onions have layers. You get it.
One of the reasons why I tend to just not enjoy horror for the most part. Now, before you start flaming in the comments, I just want to let you know that there are horror stories that I really enjoy, just like there are comedy stories that I really enjoy. Just saying that for the most part, I really don't like these genres. And the reason that I don't enjoy these genres as much as I enjoy others is because most commonly the characters fall by the wayside. And the result is that I don't care about the characters. And so you can't really scare me with your horror story, and you can't really make me connect and laugh with your characters as much as you could if I really cared about them, because otherwise it just feels like a bunch of people doing stand-up comedy as opposed to characters who deliver jokes that have meaning to them. There are plenty of comedy stories that have character development, and so it makes sense when certain characters deliver jokes or put themselves into funny situations, and those are the comedy stories that I really enjoy, as opposed to comedy stories where the characters really have no personalities and no real personality traits, and the jokes could be delivered by anybody, and the situations could be gotten into by any of the characters because the characters have no personality. They have one note that they constantly hit. Maybe this is the person who always tells the raunchy jokes, and this is the person who always tells the clean jokes, and this is the person who's always self-deprecating, and those are your notes, and they just constantly hit those notes over and over again. I'm not gonna have a good time. Why in the world are they constantly hitting those notes? Why are they like this? What is going on, and why am I supposed to be laughing? Exactly. And then let's look at horror stories. What is it that makes the story horrifying? Is it going to be that I am concerned about the characters in the story and I feel tense at the thought of losing these characters? No, usually it's going to be whatever gore fest it is that you decide to have on your television. I don't give a crap about your characters because you didn't give a crap about your characters. Now maybe you put in a small effort, but ultimately because you know that this is just about the gore and the blood and the fear, you don't really care about the characters, and the result is I don't care either. I'm sitting there thinking, when is this going to be over? And thank goodness that character is dead. That one was really annoying. More annoying than the other ones, which are also all very annoying. So one-note characters, they're pretty frustrating. At the very least, give them a couple of other personality traits or give them a reason to constantly be hitting the single note that you are constantly having them hit throughout your story. Otherwise, I'm gonna lose interest really quickly. That's the problem that I have with one-note characters. I don't really get engaged with the story if I can't connect with any of the characters. Now, there are a couple of ways that you can fix one-note characters, or that you can make them engaging even though they do constantly hit that single note. The first suggestion I want to give is actually one that I'm going to take from a book on the shelf that I really enjoyed last year, which is where? It's all the way over there. Shoot. I'm just gonna pop it up on the screen here. Evan Winter's The Rage of Dragons. I actually saw a number of poor reviews for this book that I kind of understood. People were constantly accusing Tao, the main character, of being very one-note, and that makes sense. He is pretty one-note. He is very much driven by revenge and rage, and he is constantly hitting that note over and over again throughout the story. That's the reason that I liked the book, is that him constantly hitting that note made sense, and not only that, but there were consequences in the story for him hitting that note. And in addition, all of the characters around him had more than one note that they were constantly hitting. And that only emphasized the fact that Tao was completely focused on revenge and rage and his just pure anger and hatred. Now, if everybody else around him had also been one-note characters, whether they were hitting that same rage note or not, I definitely would not have enjoyed it as much. But because the characters around Tao all had unique personalities and more than a single personality trait, and because there were punishments for Tao's one-note mindset, I really enjoyed the story. And Tao does become a little bit more well-rounded as the story progresses because he has to be, and he is repeatedly chastised for the fact that he is repeatedly hitting this single note of rage and anger and hatred over and over and over again. And that is what makes Tao, who is technically a one-note character in The Rage of Dragons, a much better character than other one-note characters. So there is a way to do a one-note character well. Now, my other suggestion for fixing one-note characters, and this may come as a shock to you, is to have more than one note.
That's impossible!
Seriously. Yeah, it's that easy, and apparently people can't do it. We are all human beings, and we have more than one note that we are constantly hitting. I have so many things that make me me, and that make my personality unique, just like you do, assuming that you have a personality. Maybe you're a one-note person. That must suck for you and everyone around you. But I know that I have so many different personality traits. I have tons of different notes that I'm hitting. I have notes that I'm hitting throughout the day. I have notes that I hit by myself in my room alone. Moving on, you have so many different personality traits and things that make you you. You probably have different friend groups as well, and you probably behave differently around each of those friend groups. So the real you may very well be buried beneath all of these different layers.
Layers!
So think about how complicated you are as a person. Now think about how complicated everybody else around you must be as well. And writers still can't come up with more than one note for each of their characters. These storytellers are not tasked with creating unique personalities for 7.7 or whatever billion people. They just need to create personalities for the number of unique individuals who are going to be in their story. And if somebody only shows up for 1 or 2 lines of dialogue, they don't really need to have more than a couple of personality traits either. You don't have to do this incredibly complex web of personality for every single character in your story. So that's seriously my tip.
Hey, phrasing!
Have more than one personality trait. Yes, maybe they're an angry person. Yes, maybe they tell raunchy jokes, but what else is there about them that's interesting? Are they a family person? Do they have a soft spot for cats? Like, give them so many more personality traits than just this one, I'm angry, or I'm raunchy, or I'm disgusting, or I'm always thinking about food, or what have you. There are so many different personality traits that can be given. Why would you give this character just one trait and have them just do that thing over the course of your entire story? There's one other way to improve one-note characters that is a little bit of a cop-out, and that's to say, okay, I have this one-note character. Now, why does this character constantly hit this one note? Why is this character discussing? Why is this character always hungry? Why is this character always telling raunchy jokes? Why is this person always self-deprecating? There should be reasons behind these personality traits, and as you explore the reasoning behind giving this character the one note that they constantly hit, you're going to start uncovering some of those layers and making the individual a lot more well-rounded than they otherwise would be if all you did was give them one note and then start writing your story. So yeah, if you really need to, give your character one note, but then roll it back a bit and kind of backtrack their personality and figure out why it is that that is the surface version of this person who most definitely has more depth to them. You just have to dig it out. Now, next, I want to give you a couple of examples of characters I think are really well written. But before I get into that, I wanted to remind you that you can like, comment, and subscribe, all of which really help me out as I try to grow this channel on this platform. So thank you for taking the time to consider doing that, and for actually doing it, for those of you who just did. Those of you who didn't, whatever, doesn't bother me. It's fine. It's pretty easy to dog on characters and to dog on the stories of others, so I want to take a moment to praise a couple of characters that I really love. And the first one I want to talk about is Jesse Pinkman from Breaking Bad. I don't think that's going to come as a surprise to anybody who knows me, but if you don't know me, I really love Breaking Bad. I cried at the end of Better Call Saul, and I'm going to talk about Jesse Pinkman for a minute here, so you're just going to have to bear with me. Jesse Pinkman starts off as this lazy drug dealer kind of person. If I had to give him one note, I'd say in season 1, it's just lazy. He's very lazy, he doesn't really care much about anything, and he's really just there to be along for the ride. But we begin to uncover some layers to Jesse Pinkman as the story progresses, and as we get into later seasons, we see him as a much more compassionate, kind, caring, and loving person than we originally got the impression of in the first season. It's a great example of having a character who is well-rounded. You even see that a little bit in that first season from time to time. There are occasional episodes and moments when you get glimpses of the fact that Jesse is more than just somebody who's lazy and wants to lie around and collect a check. Jesse Pinkman has a lot more to him, and he continues to grow and change as the story progresses, and that is what you need from a character in order for me to care about it. So Jesse Pinkman, I think, is a great study for how to develop a character well and how to make sure that your character has more than just one note that they're hitting, even if they have a primary note, which for Jesse in season 1 was laziness. Another example of a really well done character who has more than just one note to hit is Jimmy McGill from Better Call Saul. What? You don't want me to do another one from the Breaking Bad universe? Okay, fine. Joel from The Last of Us. You follow Joel and empathize with him from the very beginning of his journey when the apocalypse is first starting, all the way through to when he is escorting Ellie across this apocalyptic horror show. And Joel does grow as a character over the course of that, but what you're really seeing is the breaking away of the layers and the walls that he has put around himself, because all those walls are just one note saying survive. If Joel had a single personality trait or one thing that really defined him in the early stages of the game, it would be survive. I only care about surviving, I don't care about anything else, and I won't let myself care about anything else. But there are reasons for why he has put those walls up, and as you start seeing them break down, you start to see more and more about Joel, and you really get the impression that he's a much deeper character than just another guy in the apocalypse who wants to survive it. And that is another great example of a way to do a character who appears to have one note really well, because if you just jumped into the story without going through the prologue of The Last of Us, you'd think Joel is kind of a jerk and that all he cares about is surviving. but having seen the prologue, you can understand why he is the way that he is now, and you can kind of predict that over time, some of those walls might break down and you may see the human being behind them. There are so many other examples of incredible characters out there, like Ephraim from the Red Rising series, or Trevor from Travelers, or maybe Jin Sakai from Ghost of Tsushima. I have tons of examples that I could give, and I would love to talk about how great all of these characters are, or maybe do deep dive videos into why I think that they are individually great characters, but for now, I think I'm just going to leave you with this. Now, the best examples of fleshed out, well-rounded characters are the ones you're going to meet in real life. People are excellent character studies for really great characters. I'm not saying that you should write everybody you know into your next story or anything like that, but if you look at them and consider these human beings, it's a pretty good way for you to measure just how complex a character can and should be in a story. Thank you so much for taking the time to check out this video. I really appreciate it. If you'd like to see another video from me, you can do so by clicking up here. And until next time, bye.
Layers!